conversation continues, and I'm back on camera. I don't know what happened there on the last feed, but we're making it happen, making things happen. I'm really excited for this next conversation. We have done a lot of work with Feast over the years, and we lead two support groups, or I guess three support groups actually, but we've got support groups for siblings and also support groups for caregivers. And it's just an amazing opportunity to be able to bring our organizations together and offer this resource to the community. And now today we're going to talk a little bit more about how we can support the loved ones in our lives and support siblings in our lives who might be struggling with an eating disorder. But before we get that started, I would love to go around and let this amazing panel go ahead and introduce themselves. So Jenny, it looks like you're up first on my screen if you wanted to get this party started.
Sure. Thank you, Jason. I'm Jenny Gaines, and I am the Director of Programs and Services at Feast. And I have the pleasure of getting to work as a volunteer, as a caregiver support group leader, and then work with Georgie, Sunday, and Sarah as sibling support group leaders and a caregiver support group leader. And I love it.
All right, we'll go ahead and pass it off to Georgie.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Georgie. I am Jenny's daughter, so that we have that is important to say. But I've been involved with leading the sibling support group for about 2 years now, and absolutely love it. So I come with the experience of having a younger sister recovered from anorexia.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Georgie. I will go ahead and pass it off to Sunday now.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. Hi, everyone. And I am also a sibling support group leader with Georgie. My sister was diagnosed with anorexia about 3.5 years ago. So that's the experience that I bring to group. And it has been such a privilege and honor to be a part of this group. So I'm super happy to be here today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for everything you're doing. And last but not least, we'll go ahead and let Sarah introduce yourself. Let's see. Oh, Sarah, it doesn't look like we can hear you. I know Sarah mentioned that she was having some connection issues. So there we go. Oh.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm having connection issues. I might just drop off. Oh, good. Okay. If it keeps going, I'll back up. I just want to share that I'm a caregiver support group leader. My daughter was diagnosed at 14 with anorexia, and we powered through family-based treatment to get her well and into solid recovery. And it's really been rewarding to be part of the caregiver support groups where we can sort of share that hope and the experience and just really be in a space with others who share the same experience.
Yeah. Well, thank you. So yeah, let's get this conversation started. One of the first things that comes to mind when I think about an eating disorder is the fact that it impacts the entire household. It impacts the entire family. And that's why it's so important that we be here to support the caregivers and to support the siblings and the loved ones, because they might not be experiencing an eating disorder, but if you love somebody who's experiencing an eating disorder, it can be very painful. It can be a very difficult, challenging, distressing time. So I was just wondering if anyone would like to, kind of start maybe speaking about your own personal experience with that, or just kind of what you've seen with an eating disorder really impacting the house or the family.
I can definitely speak to that. I don't want to jump in front of anyone, but when you say it impacts the whole family, it really does. And it impacts it in ways that I don't think anyone can possibly anticipate. I think for me, that was one of the hardest things, is that I felt so confident that I was doing such a great job as a mom. And suddenly I felt like I lost my confidence when my daughter got ill. And I learned very quickly that it had nothing to do with me. It was not my fault. And that was very helpful. But at the same time, I looked at how all of us were just really worried about her. And it took me a while to learn that I had to really prioritize my own mental health in order to be able to be there for her. And if anything, I think the family has grown closer and has learned that all of us have to help each other and help ourselves at the same time. And so it's as hard as it was also one of the biggest growth experiences that I and my family, I think, have ever had. And so I'm really, really grateful. And I'm especially grateful for the community that I found at Feast and all the other caregivers that had gone ahead of me.
I would like to add on to that as one of the other children in that family. I would agree with what my mom said, that we did grow tighter and closer through this experience, even though it was a really difficult one. And so for anyone who's going through this right now, no matter which side of the eating disorder you're on, there is hope that the family relationships can stay really strong and even get stronger. A lot of times it feels like you're losing that connection with your loved one, but we are, all here today to tell you that you can absolutely maintain that and grow that connection again. So I think as you were talking, Jason, like that was the main thing that popped into my head, is like really emphasizing that message. And also I think it affects everyone else in the family unit by you kind of like start to feel like your stuff just isn't important, and objectively outside of it, like, of course that's not true. We all have things going on in our lives that are still important, but it's hard to celebrate the little things. It's hard to even be upset about your own personal things you have going on when you see how much your sibling, in my case, is suffering. So I think having peers and having a community like in Feast through ANAD helps you take time for that. And that's really important also in maintaining that sibling relationship, is, like my mom said, taking that space for yourself as well.
I would love to add on to that, because I was just talking with my kids about, there was a moment when we had one child with a birthday that we really wanted to celebrate, and my sick child couldn't get through lunch. We were having a really hard moment. And it would have been easy to just say, oh, we'll do the birthday a different time. We're just going to focus on my kid that really needs help and is struggling. And instead we made kind of a big deal about the sister having a birthday, and maybe we can rally. And my daughter, who was she was having a tough moment, but she kind of drew on that love for her sister to get herself out of that moment, so we could all go on in our day. And holding that space for the siblings, for the kids who aren't sick, really can help our loved ones with the eating disorder get well too, because those bonds that you form when you're little kids don't go away just because of the illness. It's all it's under there somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautifully said, all of you. I think the thing I would like to add on is that what I've learned through the incredible experience of being part of a support group is how, first of all, we're not alone in these experiences that we're talking about. And that is one of the most life-changing parts about group. And then also what I've heard from siblings who have come to support group is that they're unsure of their role and their place in treatment for their sibling. Should they continue to be a sibling and try to distract their sibling through it, or should they help? We talk a lot about like the sibling code, where you don't tell the parents something that the sibling has done usually, but maybe sometimes you have to break that sibling code out of love and care. And I've just been blown away by how much these people who come to sibling group care about their siblings, and they want to support their siblings. And often our reminder is, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself too. And I think that cliche of like putting your mask on in the airplane before others is, it can't be emphasized enough in this setting. And I was actually just reading through some notes that that I took during one of our support groups, and we ended it by asking, what's something good that came out of treatment? And I just read over a few of the responses, and one of them was this sweet attendee who was saying, like, my sister didn't complain when she ate a piece of bread at dinner, and inwardly my heart was celebrating. And we were just kind of discussing how these mundane things become so beautiful through treatment. So there's a lot of like good and challenge at the same time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. One of the things that I've traveled around and spoke to many audiences, and one question in particular really resonated with me, and it was a mom who has a daughter who's battling an eating disorder, and she was crying and just wanted to know what she could do to fix this. How could she fix this problem? And I think it's so hard because for so many of us, that's what we want to do. We just want to step in and fix it. And it's really hard because with an eating disorder, it's not that easy. You just can't fix things. So what advice would you give to family members out there who are supporting a loved one right now? And they so badly do, they just want to fix it, but they know that they can't.
Sarah, do you want to go? I don't want to step in front. Do you want to answer?
I have lots of thoughts. I'm sure you do too. That you're so right. That desire to fix it is really big, and that wish for. I always joke that when my kids have a virus, I always hope it's strep throat because you can go and get the medicine and you're well. And there's just not a magic pill that makes this go away. And the feast community, I really do feel helped me find the little pieces of the puzzle that I could build into getting her fixed. And fixed isn't the right word, but that I could get her to strong recovery. All of those skills that I learned in that group and every book I read, you can empower yourself. And I think that goes back to what they told us kind of in the early days in the hospital. As parents, when your child is sick, even with an eating disorder, that wisdom inside you is in there to help them get well. You know how to take care of your child. You know how to feed them. Though eating disorder recovery is like living in the upside down and nothing is intuitive, you intuitively know what they need, and you can draw on that wisdom to help them get well. So even though it's really hard, I would tell parents to trust themselves and support themselves with as many experts as they can.
Yeah, I love all that you said, Sarah. The word empower, I think, is really key that you were just expressing. I think taking the burden off of every parent's shoulders, that they have the responsibility to, quote, fix. It would be just a really great message to hear in the beginning. Some of us are so overly responsible, at least we feel we are overly responsible for every single thing that happens to our families. And for me, the eating disorder taught me not only could I not fix my daughter's eating disorder, truly, I can't fix anybody's anything. And that's not my role, but I can empower myself. I can become very knowledgeable about eating disorders. I can get really good at managing my own distress so that I can show up as the mom that my daughter needs when she's distressed. And I think turning the focus to how can we respond in a way that's not reactive, respond in a way that's helpful, respond in a way that maximizes their potential to do well in treatment and to get to recovery and stay in recovery. No fixing is required.
I love that. Thank you. Yeah, I could just erase the word fix from this whole thing, but it is definitely something that, I think comes to people's minds throughout it. I'm a problem solver. I love to jump in and solve problems, and it's so difficult when you can't very easily. So one of the things we kind of talked about at the beginning of this conversation that I want to dive into a little bit more is just the power of community and being able to connect with other individuals who have similar experiences. Every experience is different, but we have those common bonds and those common things that we've shared. And I think that our support groups really set up for that community, whether it's siblings or caregivers. So I would love to hear both, like from a sibling perspective and also from a caregiver perspective. Why is community so important? Why is
I feel personally like Sunday should jump in because she always just communicates about community so eloquently. So I'm going to put you on the spot, Sunday.
Oh, thanks, Georgie. Well, I think when you were asking the question, Jason, I went back into the very beginning phases of treatment when we were just, the beginning is often one of the darkest times where you just feel there's this huge unknown and you don't know how to proceed and you don't know if you're doing things right. And you're kind of trying to build up that kind of intuition that we were talking about, where you're like, I think that this is the right thing to do, but it feels really scary. And I remember there were days where and I tell this story in group a lot. I was so stressed out. I just started playing Angry Birds, a game on my phone, because I couldn't do anything else. I just needed to regulate myself. And I felt a little bit ashamed because I think we often say like, oh, get off your phone, stop spending time on your screen. It's embarrassing. I'm like in my 20s playing this app made for children, whatever. But I joined this community of other siblings. It was my first time going to a support group. And it was me and all of these siblings who were 8 and 9 and 12 years old. And the minute I told them, I'm going to admit I've been playing Angry Birds to cope, all of their faces lit up. And we were able to kind of help each other understand that sometimes you have to do things out of the ordinary to get through these challenging times. And so I don't know if that fully answers the question. Besides that, being a part of community helps you just feel validated that what you're going through is not a solitary situation. So yeah. And Georgie, I kind of want to throw it back to you because I think you would have great things to add.
Yeah, thank you, Sunday. I was hoping you were going to tell that story because every time you do, I think it just illustrates how powerful this experience is in its ability to connect people. Even though when you're in it, like you do feel so isolated, you feel like it's tearing things apart. And then you find a space like what ANAD and Feast offers, and you realize that there are a lot of commonalities happening. And we see it in our support groups. We have a cap or like an age minimum of 13 years, but we have people ages 13 through their 60s and 70s who come to group as siblings. And it's incredible to see how these people who really on paper like couldn't be more different have such similar experiences. Like someone will start talking and end it with, if that makes sense, or I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. And you just can see on Zoom, like everybody's nodding along. And even if you haven't experienced exactly the same, is my audio messing up? Okay, it got a little funky on my end for a second. Sorry, y'all. But even if it's not exactly the same experience, even if my sister didn't go through like similar treatments or similar stages in her recovery process, there's always something that we connect with. And it helps us understand ourselves and it helps us understand our siblings better. It helps us empathize with ourselves and with each other. And there's not a single group that I get to attend that I don't feel grateful for and more connected, just like with being alive when I leave, to be quite frank. So it is probably the most powerful positive force I can think of in this situation is community.
And I was just going to add that I think if we ever ask at the end of a support group and the caregiver support group, what are you taking away? I would say 90% of the time the answer is community or a sense of community or I feel less alone. Thank you. And I think that just kind of shows how important peer support is. I know when I first started the eating disorder journey, I did feel very alone and very isolated. And I found Feast, and it was like an immediate online community, and that was powerful in and of itself. But watching the caregivers who were all at different phases of their journey together supporting each other and connecting in just a really profound way, in a deep way, in a trusting way, it is beautiful to watch. And you can tell that it's helping because they keep coming back. And being a part of that is just a real privilege. I think Sunday said that at the beginning, a real honor and a real privilege. And it's amazing to see the strength of these families and just how much they love their loved ones.
I agree with everything you're all saying. I think, sorry. I was just going to add that
I'm going to be quiet.
I haven't been doing this as long as Jenny. I've only been doing this for like 9 months now, I think. But seeing people come back at different stages of their journey to continue participating in a group because they both want to share back with others about the victories, the small victories they're seeing in their kids, or they want to problem solve something new and they know this is a good community to do it in. And then having people farther down in the journey encouraging and lifting up people that are brand new. That it's just such a warm, supportive feeling in a situation that can otherwise feel so cold and isolating. Our whole society is built around diet, and it makes you feel a little bit upside down on the eating disorder journey. And these communities just make you feel heard. And it's been a wonderful thing to be part of.
Yeah, the one thing I'm definitely going to take away from this conversation is I think I forgot just how important community is for all of us. Because for so long I've thought, as somebody with an eating disorder, it's been so nice to find that community because it's so isolating that you don't realize that the people around you also need to find that community to support them, because they can't support me unless they've got support themselves. So I think one major takeaway from this conversation is that we all need community. We all deserve community, and luckily our organizations are helping to create that space. I would love for you to share a little bit more about the work that Feast is doing, anything that's on the horizon, how folks can get connected with Feast.
Oh, thank you for that, Jason. Yes. Feast has a very important big event coming up, so I'm going to use this chance to plug it. It's called Feast of Knowledge. It's on March 23rd. It's a Sunday. It's coming up. It's an all-day virtual conference. It is some of the top experts in the eating disorder field bringing really important topics to caregivers. It's $60 to register. But if for any reason you are a caregiver and you want to attend and you're not able to, you can reach out to Feast. The website is Feast, Feast hyphen, no, I said that wrong. feast-ed.org. So Feast, the word feast-ed.org. You would think that would be the easiest thing for me to remember. But it's going to be a really special event because we have an add-on special feature this year. And Georgie is going to be there along with another one of our sibling support group leaders, Jake. And we're actually going to have a mini sibling support group session. So anyone who registers for Feast of Knowledge and they have a sibling of someone with an eating disorder that's 13 and up, they can come to this special event for sibling support group leaders. But for siblings. We're going to also have topics, things like setting boundaries, which are really important for caregivers, how to deal with caregiver stress and trauma. And the Feast website itself has a whole lot of programs and services, email support. You can find our support group times and registration on there. And we have something called a Caregiver Skill Toolkit and Feast 30 Days to plug a few more things. But I hope you'll really consider coming to Feast of Knowledge on March 23rd.
Excellent. Yeah, and we will share all of that information out too with everybody who's watching right now. Even if you're watching the recording, we'll make sure there's a link that everybody can find that information. So before we wrap up the conversation today, I've been trying to make a point of asking everybody who's joined me, what is one thing you want everybody who's listening right now to know about an eating disorder? So I'll let each one of you kind of think for a minute there about the one thing, and then whoever's ready to go, feel free to jump in. I love it. Everybody's
Okay,
so
I have one. I know. We always do this in group too, where we'll try to do like a checkout question, and then it's like we're all gonna sit and think about it for a second, and then sometimes the silence are like, it's been too long, someone's just gonna have to jump in. But I was trying to think of one, and then think of one that didn't come to mind immediately, because I feel like there are probably, it's good that messages are getting repeated, but I was trying to think of something like a little bit deeper too. So I think the one thing I would want everyone to know is that there really is no weird in eating disorders. A lot of times siblings come to group and they'll share a specific thing that their sibling's going through. and think that that is somehow unusual for eating disorders. And they do present in a lot of like ways that can be atypical by the textbook, but there really is nothing extra wrong with you when you're experiencing an eating disorder. You have an eating disorder. There are a lot of different things that can come along with that, but there is not something like uniquely wrong about you or about your sibling because they're experiencing X, Y, or Z. So adding that like extra level of shame or stigma that can sometimes come with that, just dispel that, get rid of it, because that doesn't help anyone work towards recovery. And there just is no weird. It's all part of the territory, and it's all something that you can deal with, even though it's really hard.
And I think I would say one thing about an eating disorder. I mean, something that was unexpected for me that stands out is just that it is kind of like a perfect storm of genetic and environmental risk factors. And it's going to be different for every single person, and every single person's journey is going to be different. And that's part of it. And just knowing that it's not anyone's fault. No one is to blame. It's not because you didn't receive something in your childhood or something like that, for any caregivers who are watching and feeling like maybe you did or didn't do something. It's just a really unique combination of some kind of complex factors, and it's different for everyone.
Wow. Well said, both of you. Hard to follow up after that. I think my first thought was that I think maybe the word assumptions came up, and I guess like this is something that I'm still working on, is just getting rid of assumptions in life in general about others, and you know, judgment of others and ourselves. But I think often there are a lot of people who don't know much or don't have experience with eating disorders who will be like, oh, eating disorders are genetic, like Jenny said, or oh, blank person can have an eating disorder. And I think what I'm concerned, or what I want to like spread the word about, is just that like you can never assume that someone does or doesn't have an eating disorder. They can be very silent and hidden, and they look different. There are infinite ways that an eating disorder looks, so there's no way to tell. And I think maybe I'm frustrated about living in that world where it's like all about diet culture, and so my message is just like, stop assuming things, and maybe if we can all work on our own body neutrality, maybe we can treat others with that as well.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me this afternoon to have this conversation. And let's see. We will go ahead and wrap this one up. I know we've got another conversation coming up next with Kristen. I've got to log off because now I'm off to University of Colorado to speak tonight. So if you feel like sticking around, I should still have a voice by that point. I hope so. But again, Jenny, Georgie, and Sunday, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for all the incredible work that you're doing.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Hey, Kristen, how's it going?
Going well. How about you?
It's going good. My computer's decided to cooperate here for us for a little bit. So people probably
That
wouldn't
is
know if they weren't
wonderful.
watching us. But yeah, I've had computer problems all day today. So we're making it look good, though, from the front.
Yeah, going back to the nothing is perfect, perfect isn't
Exactly.
real kind of theme.
Exactly.
But yeah, so I know you've got to run. You've got some big plans going later, so I'll hold down the fort here. For everyone watching, we are meant to be having a conversation about the diabulimia helpline coming up next. We're having some issues there. So We are going to be joined very shortly by ANAD's board president to talk a little bit about ANAD, our history, and what recovery looks like for different people. So as she gets on, I just want to thank all of you for joining us, for watching. And I would be remiss if I didn't do the thing we always have to do and do a quick plug for donations. We've got a handy QR code up there. It's a very fancy tool that we're very excited about being able to pull this up on the screen. But as you know, we are an eating disorder organization that offers all of our services for free. We never have and never will charge for any of these. So if anything you've heard today resonates with you, if you're able to, even just donating a couple dollars makes a really big difference for us. And as well, if you are feeling lucky today, we have a raffle basket on offer right now. Thank you so much to Alsana, one of our sponsors for today, who helped put this together for us. And if you follow this code, you will be able to buy some raffle tickets and see if you can get a self-care basket. And there is a follow-up prize too. We will be bringing those out tomorrow, announcing those winners. Okay. And now I am very excited. I'm going to be bringing on Dr. Maria Rego, ANAD's board president, to do some talking about ANAD. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Hi, Kristen. I have been enjoying the day of conversation so much. I have really, I've found so many amazing guests, and I've really loved seeing the ANAD team start off the day sharing things about what ANAD's up to. So all the speakers have been amazing. I mean, I didn't see every single speaker, but I saw a lot, and I've really
It's been a
enjoyed
lot of speakers. I can't blame you yet.
You know, back in the day, we used to have this Jerry Lewis telethon, and he used to like do a muscular dystrophy telethon, and it was like all day and all night. And I'm like, go Jason. Like that's what he's that's what he's doing all day.
Awesome. Okay, well, Maria, I am excited now too. We as well, going to be joining us in our conversation is Dawn. So the three of us can chat. Dawn, I'm bringing you on now. I think there might be an issue with your camera, Dawn, but all right, well, you know what, Dawn, I'm going to shuffle you off just because that doesn't seem to be working. Maria and I will chat, and if you or Erin are able to join us, then we'll give that a go in just a little bit. But okay, Maria, thank you for hopping on. I know this was unplanned, but I'm always excited to talk to you.
Me too.
So do you want to? Would you quickly introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your history with ANAD?
Yeah, my name is Dr. Maria Rego, and I've been ANAD president for, I don't really count how long, I don't really know, but I was a young student and just got my doctorate when I started working with Dr. Patricia Santucci, which is like, you know, my greatest honor. And she was vice president of ANAD. She's the she's the founding vice president of ANAD, and she's been vice president for the entirety of ANAD, which is what, 45 years, Kristen?
So Maria, we're coming up on 50 next year.
Okay, 50. Oh, we're gonna have a golden.
Mm-hmm.
You guys, everyone on here, let's have a golden. So I just do whatever Pat says. That's what I've done my whole life, and well, since I met her. And so I just got involved with ANAD then, and ANAD has turned into, it's been such a powerful organization historically. You know, it started in 1976, and it was one of a kind back then. It was the only thing going for eating disorder advocacy. But now to see, you know, what an honor for me to be on with Kristen Portland, our executive director, because she's taken all the dreams that have come up and sorted them out and, you know, gotten this into such a powerful place, having the mentorship programs, the website we have that's so informative, the helpline, the support groups, the ambassador program, I mean, if I may say, you've really multiplied so many things and really grown this organization to help so many people. And I want anyone to know that's listening is that our board and our organization is totally community focused. Like all we want to do is serve our community. And that's what we always check in about. Like how is our community doing? Are we giving them the things they need? Are we serving them properly? And if you've watched anyone today that's part of ANAD's team, I'm sure you can probably sense that that's what we care about.
Yeah. Most of you watching might not know this, but Maria is actually one of the folks who helps support our helpline volunteers in the evenings. If anything comes up that a volunteer wants to check in about, obviously no one can work 24/7, so we're not always there in the evenings, the staff. And Maria is one of our points of contact to make sure that they're supported and work through anything that comes up that a volunteer might need to get some support with.
It's
It's been a really
awesome.
beautiful thing. Yeah.
It's awesome to have a chance to check in with real ANAD volunteers while they're in the middle of doing things and see what everybody's up to. Just not. I feel like our whole team, the board, and the leadership team is not just in an ivory tower, doing things. We're always wanting to be connected.
Definitely. Oh, and it seems like Dawn is here now. Dawn is a medical outreach director with the Diabulimia Helpline. Let's see if we can get her on. And speaking of helplines, hello, welcome, Dawn. Thanks for joining us. Oh, we can't hear you. I'll give you a minute to get that sorted out. And while you're doing that, just a quick note to everyone listening, the ANAD Helpline, we are not just a referrals line. We do referrals because it helps connect people to care. It's an important thing. But we exist to be a warm line as well. Our volunteers are really trained to connect, validate, understand. We welcome repeat callers. So if you have questions or just need to talk to someone, that's what we're there for. Still not hearing you, Dawn. I'm sorry. Maria, while Dawn tries to figure that out.
Put your volume up, maybe, Dawn. Sometimes that happens to me. I have it on mute or my volume's not up, so maybe those could be a quick fix.
Yeah. Maria, do you know how the ANAD Helpline was founded?
That's a good question. Yeah, I do. It was like in the office, because I don't know if anybody knows the story of ANAD, but Vivian Meehan is ANAD's founders. She was a mom. She was a nurse. There was nothing available for eating disorder support, or even like there wasn't like specialties, the specialists or eating disorder programs. So she put a little note in the newspaper in Highland Park, Illinois. And so she said, there's this thing called anorexia and bulimia. And if anyone wants to talk about this, send me a letter. And we have a picture that she got these giant bags of mail in the US mail, in snail mail back in 1976. And so she started opening mail. And guess who her medical director was that she asked to help? Dr. Patricia Santucci. So the two of them went through mail, and they had a little office. First, it was in Vivian's living room, and then they went to, have a real office, and they would just answer the phone. So they probably had like a couple. They had like a couple people working there, and then they would like answer the phone when people called and try to grow, try to
really
accept
just an organic grassroots thing, right? Like they never set out to say, "Hey, we're going to have a national helpline everyone can call." People just heard about her and
no, it just evolved. And then Pat Santucci has been like part of developing the medical community to support eating disorders and get more training. And then, Vivian has been like the lay person. And I mean, just an honor for me over all the years to see all these different professionals when they were super young come and speak for ANAD conferences and things. I know right now, internal family systems is like all the rage in therapy. Well, I got to see Richard Swartz come to the ANAD conference, the developer. I don't even know what year, like 2004 or 5, things. I feel like ANAD has because of Vivian and Dr. Santucci, we've had a rich history in the eat. I feel like eating disorder treatment and support would never be where it was without ANAD being part of it.
Completely agreed. Maria, throughout today, we've talked to a lot of different people from different organizations about like what recovery looks like, what is important in the different cross sections. And something that made me think of you actually is several people to their conversations brought the idea of agency and having people really think about what their values are, what recovery looks like to them, rather than having professionals be prescriptive. And that's something I hear from you a lot. So I just wondered if you wanted to share anything about that.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, any marginalized community, you want to have their voice directing it, not the voice of some outsiders or some professionals telling them what recovery is. I know this came up in the first session of the day this morning about, that people with eating disorders are going to determine what recovery is. It's not going to be imposed by them, by some professional community. So professionals need to be like partners. But sometimes, historically, they don't always listen to the patients and families saying what they need or what that experience is. And ANAD has been working to change that. So having that agency, because, eating disorders are a little tricky. One of the things that happens when you have your eating disorder is eating disorders want to feel like they're you. So then you have a you who's like, this is a classic Jenny Schaefer, right? Jenny Schaefer is the author who started this idea of AD being an eating disorder, because it was too confusing before that, because you would think all these thoughts like, I got to count calories, I can't keep this food, I got to go for a run. And then you think it's all you. But many, many automatic thoughts we have can be conditioned. And they can be, developed not because they're our value system, but they're in the society we're in, and we're trying to fit in. We're reading different. We're influenced by different things, and then our automatic thoughts could be like even an eating disorder. But then we can start realizing that's not me. That's my eating disorder. And part of a beautiful thing about recovery is you rediscover who you are. Or if you're really young, you are discovering who you are. You're finding out, no, this is what I believe. This is what I think. That other thing is my eating disorder. I met someone recently and she was telling me some things. She was like, I don't want to eat this. This has too much fat. This has too many calories. And I said, in a way, I can tell you every single thing you're going to say, because that's not you. That's an eating disorder. And I know what an eating disorder is going to say. I want to know what you want. I want to know what your beliefs are. What are your values? What are your goals? And sending like a little life preserver to that person. And I know that's what parents want and families. We want our loved one back. We don't, this eating disorder is there, but that's not her or him or they. That is the entity of an eating disorder. And we can pretty much predict what eating disorders are going to say. They're not a good personality. They're like, I'm a perfectionist.
Not a great guest.
Yeah. They're like, I'm not worthy. I got to be perfect, but I'll never measure up, and no one likes me, and whatever. We know what Ed has to say. So the agency is when you find your own voice. Oh, but the reason I started saying that is because in treatment, it gets confusing with agency, because with agency, you want to determine and you want to have a voice in your treatment, in the whole community. You just have to be careful that it's your voice and not Ed's voice. Right? Yeah. Because what if Ed is like, let's not go to the doctor, let's not go to the support group, let's not participate, let's isolate it, where let's not tell our parents what's going on, where you are a precious person who deserves all good things, and that includes trying to get away from your eating disorder step by step, so you can be a powerhouse again. Anybody I've ever met that had an eating disorder is a powerhouse, but their power is like going in the wrong direction. And when they are in recovery, their power becomes unstoppable in an amazing direction that makes their life better, makes the world better. So if you have an eating disorder and you're struggling, just know that one day you're going to take all that power and you're going to direct it toward making your life better, making the world a better place. And that's what happens, right? You look at every ANAD volunteer we have that's in recovery or recovered, they are just powerhouses.
Maria, something you mentioned is, again, a theme that's come up a few times, is bringing in your values, like identifying using values to combat the eating disorder thoughts, behaviors. What does it look like to take a values-driven approach and use those in recovery?
A technical name for it is acceptance and commitment therapy. But really, it's looking at your values. It's looking at your eating disorders values versus your values, and then figuring out which things um, you want to keep in your life, or maybe I was doing this. There's a book called Interpersonal Handbook for Eating Disorders Recovery. It's by a team in UK. Ulrike Schmidt and Janet Treasure are the two authors I can think of right now. But it has a whole section in the book. It's a workbook for anorexia and bulimia recovery and eating disorder recovery. And there's a whole page in there which lists all these values, and you can go through each value so maybe perfectionism is one of the values in there, maybe control is one of the values in there, maybe kindness is one of the values. And I was working with someone on that book recently. They were looking at it and they said, Ed has hijacked every single one of my good values because she's like,
no.
I want to be kind, but Ed is telling me you're not kind enough. You're failing at it. So she's like, I don't want him to decide. I want me to decide what kindness is for me, because you should be kind. I mean, not you should, but if you'd like to be kind, you can, but you can also set limits with people and still be kind, where
And that's
perfectionism
agency too. Yeah.
Perfectionism
Choosing
says,
your
no, you're
agency,
not.
choosing where you do that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm,
All right.
mm-hmm.
And in the interest of combating perfectionism again here, we've got Dawn back, and I think we're connected to the audio now. Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
Yay!
Hey, we're so happy that you're able to join us.
Yes.
So first things first, welcome to our day of conversation. Would you mind giving a quick intro of yourself?
Thank you. No, I'm Dawn Lee Akers. I am the medical outreach director for Diabulimia Helpline, also known as DBH. We support, educate, advocate for people with diabetes and eating disorders.
Wow. That's amazing. So first up, for anyone watching who doesn't know, what is diabulimia?
So that's a really good question. Diabulimia is not a medical term. It is the comorbidity of diabetes and eating disorders. It's also known as T1DE, TIDE. It's also known as ED-DMT1, or can be ED-DMT2, eating disorders, diabetes mellitus type 1, type 2, type 3C. It is most commonly associated with insulin omission or insulin restriction. But there's probably 18% of people who have an eating disorder with diabetes and no restriction of insulin at any point. So whether it's strictly confined to that or not is up to the physicians.
Okay. So what are some warning signs here?
So if you are using insulin manipulation or medication manipulation, so it could be GLP-1s or metformin, the signs and symptoms will be anything associated with high blood sugar. So thirst, peeing a lot, slow wound healing. You get abscesses in just lots of different places, particularly private places. Long-term complications tend to run retinopathy, kidney disease, cardiac disease, that kind of thing. And then if you have an eating disorder without medication manipulation, it's going to be the same signs and symptoms as any eating disorder. Yeah, which you've already talked about earlier today.
But Dawn, that's amazing that you have developed support specifically for individuals with diabetes and eating disorders. You know, it's very hard, I think, when you get an eating disorder diagnosis. I mean, when you get a diabetes diagnosis, right? Because now they're controlling you, they're telling you what to eat, and that's not, no one's interested in that. And so you kind of do get set up like you have to go on dieting, just like anybody else that could get an eating disorder. What I've seen is a lot of people, children, will start hoarding food because they're not allowed to have it, right? So they are
Yep.
afraid that you're going to take away their sugary food. So they like get a stash of it. So that's one thing that I've seen. And I just have so much compassion for someone with diabetes trying to figure out how to take care of themselves and all the conflicts they must have.
Yeah, so there is a lot of, I guess I would call it social pressure, a focus on numbers, the education that you have. One of our favorite quotes is from Dr. Ann Goebel-Fabry from the Joslin Diabetes Institute, where she says, teaching a person how to manage diabetes is akin to teaching them how to have an eating disorder. And
Right?
you almost can't have
Wow.
diabetes without having some level of disordered eating and a focus on numbers and things like that. It also really messes up your metabolism. Regardless of what type you have, people are 2.5 times more likely to have an eating disorder if they have diabetes than without. And so there's the education piece, the social pressure piece, the focus on numbers piece, but then there's also just your body is messed up and the insulin isn't working right and the leptin isn't working right and the ghrelin isn't working right. Nothing is working right in your body, and that in and of itself can pull the trigger on an eating disorder.
Dawn, I just give you so much credit for having an organization specifically for people with diabetes and eating disorders, because you almost don't, there's not much you hear about it or see about it, but yet it's got to be so common.
Oh, it is very common. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 7 men will omit or restrict their medication in order to lose weight or maintain weight.
Wow.
And that doesn't count the people who have an eating disorder. One of our board members had anorexia and never omitted her insulin. So that doesn't even count them. So
Right,
it's
right.
very, very common and very little talked about.
Right. And high stakes,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you can easily die, right? If you
Oh,
don't
very
have the
high
right.
stakes.
Yeah.
Every time a person goes into diabetic ketoacidosis, it could be their last time. I remember I have 3 children with type 1 diabetes. One of them,
Wow.
Erin, had a severe eating disorder. She went into diabetic ketoacidosis a number of times, landed in the ICU at the hospital. And I remember one of the times the doctor came out and said to us, well, we've been treating this for 24 hours and we should see an improvement in her blood work by now. We're not seeing an improvement. You need to start thinking about what you want to do long term. And I almost lost it because by that point we had been in and out so many times, it had become almost routine. And to understand that, no, this really could be the last time. She is fine. She is totally recovered.
Oh my gosh.
It was not the last time. But
Oh.
it's very serious. And the other thing is that complications that you get during your eating disorder, so kidney disease, gastroparesis, retinopathy, that's permanent. Even after you recover from the eating disorder, that doesn't go away. You have killed those nerves and they may regenerate somewhat, but they're never going to regenerate back to what it was originally. So my daughter struggled for a decade, for 10 years before she recovered. And at first they didn't even recognize it. They just said she was a rebellious teenager. And so she will take medication for the rest of her life because of the complications.
Did she inspire you to be part of the organization that you have now?
She did. She actually started the organization.
Amazing.
So
wow.
Erin was originally scheduled to be on this call. And as luck would have it, she is actually dealing with a client emergency. I am our medical outreach director. I sit on our board of directors. And so I agreed to go on in her place at the last minute. Very
Well,
last minute.
Well,
that's
thank you so much, and
important.
respect to those
Yes.
priorities, like absolutely.
Definitely,
I know
definitely.
we had a lot of back and forth getting you on, but could you, before our time ends, could you tell us a little bit more about the Diabulimia Helpline and maybe mention your upcoming conference?
Yes. So we have a 24/7 helpline that people can call. It's 425-985-3635. You can also find it on our website, which is dbh.org. And we have a database. We offer online support groups. We have a database of treatment referrals, people who have experience with both diabetes and eating disorders. That's a hard squirrel to find. And then every other year since 2018, we've been doing a conference, an annual conference. It's international. This year it is in New York City. It's May 2nd to the 4th. You can find registration, more information, an agenda, who our speakers are. It's all on our website. It's a 2-track event. So there is one track for healthcare professionals with CE credits who want to learn more about how to treat this, because you really have to treat it as intertwined, not treat the eating disorder and the diabetes separately. That doesn't work. There are many studies that show that doesn't work. Even if you have the same psychopathology as a person that has the same eating disorder but without diabetes, it doesn't work. And then there's a second track for people with diabetes who are experiencing an eating disorder, disordered eating, issues with food, anything like that.
That's amazing. And all of this information is going to be in the resource roundup. So if you're watching and haven't registered, go ahead and register to make sure you get all of the follow-up information after that.
There you go.
Dawn, it's amazing hearing what you guys are doing, and please give Erin our best, because
I will do that.
You and she are doing something so needed and so important. You really made me think, like, this is just something we never talk about, we never hear about. So ANAD, Kristen and Jason and everyone, thank you for putting Dawn and Erin on the schedule, because it's super important.
Yes, very important.
All right, Maria, thank you for hopping
thanks.
in. Always good to see you. Dawn, thanks for
Anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate you both.
Great.
All right. Now, everyone, we are going to be talking about a kind of treatment to come up next. And this is one that I'm pretty excited about. It is the impact of compassion-based care. So this is in partnership with one of today's sponsors, Alsana, who again is sponsoring our really amazing raffle basket. So if you haven't yet checked that out, go ahead and scan that code to find some tickets. And I got the chance to record this conversation earlier this week, and it was a lot of fun. So I hope you enjoy it. Hello, everyone. Again, I am welcoming you back to our day of conversation, where we have lots of really amazing conversations. I'm still Kristen, and today at this time, I am being joined by Mary Elizabeth Akanaka, who is the VP of Clinical Services in Alsana at Birmingham. And we are going to be talking about a very cool thing that I am excited to learn more about. And that is compassion-focused therapy, which, I was familiar with a lot of the other therapies, DBT, CBT, all of the acronyms, but not so much CFT. So Mary, would you let us know what that is?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Kristen. It's a pleasure to get to be a part of this for such an important week. So compassion focused therapy, I think you just mentioned like there are all of these other modalities, right? And I think they all serve a purpose, they all serve a function. And compassion focused therapy actually is just a really great partner to all of those pieces. And so genuinely the foundation is, what does it look like to have curiosity towards your story, to understand um, why you have come to be the way that you are, and in what ways have you had to attempt to survive in the world based on those experiences? For our clients, that would be the eating disorder and other, whether it's substance abuse or any of those other pieces. But the idea of finding and gaining an understanding as to why you do what you do in terms of your eating disorder really allows you to step away from a level of shame in regards to how you feel towards yourself in the choices that you're making and your worthiness of change moving forward. And so if we can look at our historical influences, so what were things that happened in childhood, relationships to up to whatever age you are, and really understand what was it that you were trying to protect yourself from. I think that really allows us to soften, and with that understanding allows the potential space for compassion. And with that compassion, we then have the opportunity to consider change, right? We have the capacity to understand why why we do what we do. Next step is recognizing that it's just not working out anymore, right? The eating disorder is no longer serving you in the way that it originally did. And now it's time to utilize different tools and resources to be able to navigate your own internal system in a way that doesn't require these maladaptive behaviors, so to speak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I've been looking forward to this conversation because earlier today I was talking with someone about binge eating disorder, and we touched on making choices that are life affirming and coming back and really understanding the why and looking at the whole human and showing compassion to yourself.
Yes.
And I lead one of ANAD's groups, and I hear it all the time in our groups, and I felt it, like the idea of should, like I should be better, I should be able to do these things, I should be further along, like it's my fault that this is happening. How did the CFT address that really?
Yeah, absolutely. So something you said sparked my thinking. Also, I love that you were talking about binge eating disorder. I think having the capacity to even just talk about what it is that your experiences have been automatically decrease shame, right? Shame can, I mean, darkness can exist in the light, right? We know that. And when I think about compassion, I think about my own internal system. And I think when we are unwell and feel like we always live in the shoulds, then we are living in that dark space. And the idea of compassion is actually opening the door to that light. And that light is the opportunity to decrease that shame and understanding. I think something that's really important too, is we're really good most of the time at being compassionate towards other people. We are, but we really stink at receiving compassion, and most definitely, giving ourselves compassion, regardless of what you tell others, you're truly the exception to the rule for whatever reason, and it doesn't apply to you. And so I think it's important to look at why that is. And so a part of that is exploring what your fears are in regards to compassion. Perhaps what are the blocks? What are the things getting in the way that doesn't permit you to have the space to explore this idea? And resistant, like why are you so eager to push that idea away? And one thing, as you were talking, that I think is really important is just because we are stepping into a compassionate stance for ourselves doesn't mean we're not taking accountability for our choices. Right? I think because there's a lot of those shoulds, as you said, and it's a lot of looking back and thinking, oh, I can't believe I did that, or this is what I did, and it's unforgivable, and all of those pieces. Well, I think both exist where, yes, I need to take accountability for the choices that I have made, and I do have to deal with the consequences of them. And at the same time, I can understand why those choices were made, what the foundation of myself is, and why that came to be, and learn to have compassion for myself in that understanding, while also learning how to move in the right direction. Yeah,
Showing compassion isn't giving blanket permission.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
You know, I think about, you know, maybe a client who has, you know, just such rigidity, you know, and it's like, if I'm not rigid towards myself, if I'm not, you know, like there's no space for that compassion, and that's simply just not the case.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we touched base before today, and there
Yeah.
was something that you brought up that I was really curious about, more about like the eating disorders within an evolutionary framework. Like how does that work? Like why does this happen?
Yeah, absolutely. So in CFT terms, it's known as the tricky brain. And so we essentially are made up of an old brain and a new brain, hence evolutionary, right? Our minds, our abilities, our capacities over the years have changed. You know, when humans were first on this earth, they were much more primal, right, than we are today, because survival looks different. The problem is that sometimes the old brain and the new brain don't know how to connect with each other properly. So, for example, an old brain, let's say you have a zebra out in the wild and he's just like munching on his grass, you know, living his best life, having his
Doing
lunch.
zebra things.
That's
Yeah.
right, doing zebra things. And all of a sudden, a lion, right, comes charging. At that point, the zebra has three choices, right? It's going to try to flee. It's going to stand still, kind of play dead, or it's going to fight back, right? And so it will make one of those choices. I think more often than not, I think zebras kind of play dead, you know, because the lion's just not as interested. But anyway, that's besides the point. Once the lion leaves, meaning once the threat is gone, the zebra's done. He just goes right back to chewing his grass. Like
He
there
can
is
shake it off and do his zebra thing
yes,
immediately.
right. There is no aftermath to that experience. Okay. Whereas we, as evolutionary beings with this new brain, there's an aftermath to every experience that we have, whether positive or negative, right? That's what memories are. That's what experience and learning is. We hear messages. We are told things, and that is establishing our belief system within our brain, right? When we are faced with experiences that have been very activating or traumatic, our body, unfortunately, doesn't always know how to turn that off. And so what can happen is we can be placed into what we call the threat system when there actually isn't a real threat in the space. So for whatever reason, you were activated and your internal safety no longer exist. And so you are living in this space of threat, meaning you are always in caution. I think about a person who walks into the room and maybe they always have to be facing the door, and you can watch their eyes kind of darting around to make sure that they are aware of every last detail, right? That is them being in their threat system. They are preparing themselves for action if that is what has to happen. The tricky part about that is the fact that that happens when it doesn't need to,
Yeah.
right? We can be in a space that demonstrates externally a space of safeness, right? We can't promise safety, but we can demonstrate safeness. And we can be in a space that is demonstrating that, but your brain is still telling you that the lion is coming, right? And so we have to learn how to soothe ourselves, to learn those DBT, CBT, all of those skills. I call it alphabet soup, to really be able to learn how to get into our soothe system and to learn how to only go to the threat system as needed. It's very important, right? I mean, you need to have that, but not all of the time. And so really learning how to self-regulate in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I imagine understanding this, like really learning it and getting to the bottom of that makes it, hopefully a little easier to give
Yes.
yourself that grace and compassion.
Of course, I think so. I mean, I think if I understand why my brain thinks the way that it does, and that I'm not the only one, and this is truly, a part of evolution, then it's not my fault, right?
Yeah.
Like, I am not innately wrong or bad. I am just being, and my brain is doing what it's designed to do, which is to protect me, right? But the unfortunate reality is that it's just gotten out of whack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think kind of related to this, we had a question come in to say, so we're talking about like learning this. I imagine doing some of this work comes up earlier in recovery when you're trying to build that compassion, but can compassion focused therapy be used at any point of recovery, including to maintain recovery for folks who identify as recovered?
Yes, absolutely. There is a space for compassion focused therapy at all levels of the recovery process and in the recovered space, right? I think when we are starting our recovery journey, the first goal is obviously stabilization of behaviors. And that's where we're really needing to bring in some more of those resources of alphabet soup. But at the same time, it's also an opportunity to understand your life story and to learn to have curiosity about it at those initial stages, to really explore what are those negative beliefs? How did they come to be? In order to consider the idea of changing them, right? I think then as you move on and progress, that is where you then are able to truly do that deeper work of changing your internal beliefs about yourself and replace them potentially with a compassionate viewpoint on yourself, because you've now come to this place of understanding. And then I think along the road, I think staying curious is always the right step in recovery, right? Staying curious and to understand why you made that choice, being accountable and also still moving forward, right? That to me is a part of recovery. And so if we are doing that, then we are always working towards being in a space of compassion for ourselves.
I really love that. And again, you're bringing in the accountability too. We're not giving ourselves carte blanche. We're not saying like, oh, I did that, I am now bad, or I can completely ignore it.
Yeah.
There's a sense of like ownership and
Mhm.
learning. It's
Yes.
collecting data on
Yes.
yourself.
Yes, you're exactly right. You're exactly right.
Yeah. Well, okay, I have a question too. And this,
Okay.
something that comes up for me personally, something I see all the time in the people around me, but why is it so much easier to be compassionate, to show grace to everyone else and not yourself?
hmm hmm Because we are the exception to the rule, right? That's why, for whatever, not for whatever reason, our innate and historical influences, um, established a language that we have about ourselves towards ourselves. And that is the lens in which we see the world, right? That is how we see everything. And if that is how I'm viewing the like myself and the world, then why would I qualify for compassion? Why would I be worthy of that? Right? I find that many people in our space, and that are in the process of recovery are such empaths and such smart, intelligent human beings. And so they're able to look across the room and hear somebody else's story, and it could be almost mirroring their own. And what they would tell that other person is night and day to what they would tell themselves,
Yes.
And so at that point, I ask my favorite question, which is what makes you so special? What makes you so special
Mm,
that you are like the one out of the bunch who got chosen to not be worthy of compassion? Right?
yeah.
Is that really how the world is designed? Is that really how we are designed as human beings? Or does this happen to be a flaw of humanity and the messages that we have received have really falsified the truth, right? Which is, I am worthy of love. I'm worthy of compassion. I'm worthy of caring for myself. I'm worthy of moving forward. I'm worthy of doing something differently, right? All of those pieces that really come with that compassionate side.
It's so true. I have
Yeah.
seen people who are struggling so hard give the most incredible advice, validate people, empathize. It's beautiful to see,
Yeah.
but they can't feel
hmm
it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yep. Yeah, there's often it goes back to, the fear. What are you afraid
Mhm.
of if you were to let your wall down enough to give
Yeah.
yourself some compassion? I think to be curious requires vulnerability, right? Because you have to
Mhm.
explore. And that means putting your wall down to some extent. Um, or what are the blocks that are in the way? I think if I'm at the risk of being homeless, then my priority is finding housing. There's not space and time for compassion, right? What
Yeah.
are these like realistic life things that are happening that may get in the way of your ability to slow down enough to explore? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's fair because I think a lot of the time we think about, therapy, doing the work on yourselves, recovery as happening in its own little bubble, right? Like, but we don't
Mhm.
always have the
No.
luxury of being able to
Right.
focus on these things to the exclusion of everything
Yep.
else. And, the
Yeah.
bills still have to get paid, the kids still have to get to school. All
That's
all of those
exactly
things are
right.
still happening.
hmm Yes. And I go back to we are brilliant people who learn how to manage and juggle it all, but sometimes there's just too much to be able to really do that internal, deep work. And so there is moments of time where you've got to get those pieces kind of figured out so that you can invest in yourself and make yourself a priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. We're talking about compassion and earlier today I talked to someone else about coping skills as like
Mhm.
muscles, things you can develop, like practice on.
Yeah.
Is compassion the same thing? Like, can you
Yes.
practice
Yeah.
compassion for yourself as well as for other people in the same way that you
Yes.
can practice like using breathing to get through sticky moments.
Yes, absolutely. There are plenty of tools that I think partner with cognitive behavioral therapy, and the foundation of that with this infusion of compassion, that allows you to truly practice the skill of gaining insight and compassion towards yourself. One of the ways you could do that is this idea of the compassionate other. This is, I think, probably one of my favorite exercises with our clients. And the idea, kind of going back to what we were just talking about, which is, what I would tell someone else is vastly different than my own internal dialogue, right? Kind of going back to that space. This idea of if you were to create this ideal human or being or entity, it doesn't have to be a person. And this individual or this being is innately compassionate. There is no judgment. There's no flaw in them. They are wise. They are a warm hug, like all the way around, Um, and if you were to identify that individual, and it might be someone in your life that you are kind of making feel bigger, right? Or more compassionate, or any of those things. It could be someone in your world that sticks out. But if you're able to develop that, you can then start to have a dialogue of what would they say to me in this situation? If I were sitting in a space with this ideal, compassionate individual, and I said, I'm a terrible human, I'm not worthy of any of these things, what would their response be? I think that when we are able to externalize, um, the dialogue that could potentially apply to us, it's a great place to start, right? And learning
Wow,
how
yeah.
to receive that back in. Because here's the thing is there is no real other person. You are learning how to talk to yourself in that way.
Why does it make such a difference putting that compassion like one step removed, even though it is you talking to yourself, but we're
Yep.
putting this one layer there? Why
Yep.
why does that make such a difference?
Because I think it goes back to being able to recognize or provide compassion to something other than yourself, right? I think there's enough emotional separation, enough distance. If you are, truly doing like imagery work and taking yourself into this space and seeing this human or this entity, this being, then it truly is separated from yourself, right? And I think that there's a safety in that. I think there's a safety in exploring what that dialogue could be. And then I think we're working towards a recognition that that is actually you demonstrating the ability to speak to yourself in a completely different way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you have an ideal compassionate other?
I do. I do.
Would you tell us about them?
I would love to. Yeah, so it's my mother-in-law. So my husband's Nigerian. He's been in the States for about a little over 10 years, and I never got to meet my mother-in-law. So she actually passed away in this past year, but she lived in Nigeria, and I never had the opportunity to meet her in person. But I spoke to her on the phone, many, many times, and I have seen lots of pictures, some, video, and so you kind of create this persona in your mind. And she has got just this guttural, deep laugh that I adore. And I truly just imagine that if I were to walk into her presence at this time, like her hug and love and lack of judgment and joy and compassion towards me would be indescribable. Right. And so I love being able to think about her in that way. And it stays relatable to myself, right? It stays in this kind of tangible space, but yeah, that would be mine.
That's amazing. I
Yeah.
feel like this is something I want to think about now and
Yes,
bring that
you
to,
should.
yeah.
Yeah, it's really
It
cool.
and it's interesting because it's kind of a mental gymnastics, right? But it's
Mm,
something you can practice. And
yes.
honestly, it sounds like a really kind of a fun thing to be able to practice.
Yes, absolutely. And, just like any other skill, you know, we encourage that you practice that skill when you're not in a space of distress,
Hmm.
right? So, because that's how we can make it make it this, pretty natural, consistent choice and thing to do. I think examining or having that compassionate other and exploring that dynamic in relationship when we're not in a space of distress really allows you to kind of like fill up your word bank with
Hmm.
compassionate, positive words. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? So you now
Yes.
you have you're building up this bucket of truth to be able to access when you're in that space of distress.
Yeah. We have some advocacy toolkits and encouraging people to interrupt diet culture talk. But even just the practicing it, the saying it,
Yes.
knowing what those words are makes it
Yep.
easier in the moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, then final question, just to real
Mhm.
quick to wrap us off. What would you say to anyone listening who is still sitting there thinking like, "Ooh, I don't really deserve to be compassionate to myself."
Mhm. You're not that special. You're not that special. Whoever you are, I adore you, and you are worthy of so much, regardless of history. Um, but you're not so special that you are the chosen one who doesn't deserve compassion in the world.
That is the best way I think I've ever heard shooting down someone's specialness. I like it.
You're welcome.
Okay, Mary, thank you so much for the conversation today. I really enjoyed this. It was wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. Oop, well, could you scooch that way, please? Thank you. Thank you so much for joining that amazing conversation about compassion focused therapy. Once again, I was so excited to learn more about that. And thank you so much to Alsana, both for coming to have that conversation with us and for providing the incredible raffle basket. Oh, I think I left that QR code up the whole time. Sorry about that, folks. I'll put it away for the next one. But yeah. All right. So coming up next, we have a conversation about ASAP, which, if you do not know, that is our ANAD School Ambassador Program. And that is going to be with EDRC and Akita. And once I get that video up, I will let you hear all about that. This is a really amazing new program that we've been working on, and I am very excited to get it up for everyone. So give me 1 second while I get it going. As you can see, I have a guest here today. Well, you can wave if you want to. Video. All right, one moment, everybody. We're gonna go quiet on the air for just 1 second while I find this, the correct video.
Two weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with five incredible students and young adults who are raising awareness of eating disorders in Gen Z. I'm now excited for the opportunity to share this conversation with all of you. Only 1 in 5 adolescents seek the eating disorder treatment that they deserve. That means we have to do a better job of raising awareness, breaking down the stigma, and challenging the stereotypes around eating disorders. Without further ado, I'm excited to welcome the panelists and get this important conversation started.
So my name is Sahana, and I am an undergraduate student at the University of California, Santa Cruz, studying psychology. I'm also a long-term volunteer for the Eating Disorders Resource Center of Silicon Valley. I've been there for about 5 years at this point, and I focused a lot on education and free educational services to my community, as well as advocacy there. And yeah, that's something that I'm super passionate about. Additionally, I am a member of the Eating Disorder Coalition's Young Leaders Council, which I joined last year, and I'm super excited to continue my advocacy on a national scale. So that's a little bit about me. And then to answer Jason's question, one thing that I wish more people knew about eating disorders was I wish that people didn't really regard eating disorders as a choice. I think even as mental health has kind of shifted with this generation, there's still the stigma surrounding eating disorders, and there's still this kind of myth that some people uphold, thinking that eating disorders is a choice, and that is absolutely not true. Eating disorders are a super, super serious mental health condition and mental illness, and they should be regarded as such, and they're not a choice.
So a little about me is that, well, my name is Dia, and I'm a junior at McNeil High School in Texas. I've been able to see the development of ASAP from the very start, from when it was just an idea to the nationwide program it is today. As Mr. Wood mentioned, we're hoping to expand the program to 25 different states. I believe we have expanded it to 14 states so far. So we're practically halfway there. Outside of ASAP, I'm the founder and president of my school's Eating Disorder Support and Awareness Club called EDSA, and I'm also the program director for the All Bodies Coalitions. It's an organization. For them, I've worked to create eating disorder educational resources that can be shared with students and educators to raise better awareness and how they can offer support to these students. And to answer your question, I was initially actually also going to do that eating disorders are not a choice, but another thing that I wish more people knew about eating disorders is that recovery does not happen overnight. I know personally in my recovery, I just constantly felt that everyone around me was expecting me, oh, this is the day she'll recover, or like, why aren't you recovered yet? And they would just constantly pressure me into recovering sooner than I was capable of doing. But in reality, recovery is a long and comprehensive process that involves a bunch of things, such as physical recovery as well as mental recovery. And it just doesn't happen overnight, and it's not linear at all. And I just wish more people realize that it takes time to recover, but nonetheless, recovery is possible with the right help and resources.
everyone. So my name is Mina. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a third year at the University of Alaska, Anchorage, where I currently am located. And I do a lot of work with AKITA, which is the Alaska Eating Disorder Alliance. They have been extremely influential in helping gather resources, create support groups, just guide those who are struggling in Alaska on their journey to recovery. And I'm also working with the EDC-YLC, so the Eating Disorder Coalition Youth Leader Council. And I am super excited to be here. And to answer the question that Jason asked, I would say I wish everyone knew that eating disorders don't discriminate. So it doesn't matter what socioeconomic class you are, what race, ethnicity, what gender. It can happen to anyone at any time, right? So yeah.
My name is Monish Ramesh, and I'm a senior at Wayzata High School, located in the suburbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota. A part of the ANAD ASAP program, I run an Instagram account called Gen Z Against Eating Disorders, which is designed to spread awareness on eating disorders while encouraging those struggling to reach out for help and find that path of recovery. And I made an Instagram since I wanted to specifically spread awareness to adolescents, and also since social media is filled with so much negativity already, I kind of wanted to spread a little bit of positivity. One thing I wish people knew about eating disorders, I was going to say that there's like no telling factor, like no sexual orientation, race, or gender, but also that there's nothing like as sick enough. Like you don't have to be a certain weight, or like you don't have to be sick enough for eating disorder help. If you're struggling, then you should definitely reach out for that help.
All right, and I completely echo that, and all the things that you all shared throughout the introductions. All four of those, I feel like we could stop the conversation right here, and we got the important messages out just like that. But we've got to have a conversation. That's what this day is all about, is talking about eating disorders in Gen Z. So I want to go ahead and just open up the conversation now to all of the panelists. And our first question that I wanted to throw out there are, what are some of the common misconceptions or the stereotypes that you're hearing about eating disorders from your peers or you're hearing in school? What are the conversations? What are the barriers that you're running into right now in the work that you're doing?
Was that I feel like people think that people with eating disorders hate food, but I don't think that's necessarily true, because as someone who's like struggled with stuff like that before, and yeah, I feel like I never hated food. It's just that I like and made it the enemy, and I still love food, and I've loved food all my life. So yeah.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. Like something like this, it was so ironic because it literally came up in class like 2 days ago, where I was like just sitting there doing my work, and behind me, I hear this girl be like, "Oh, I didn't eat all day," and then the other person, "What? Are you anorexic?" And I was just like, "What?" Like I was sitting there hearing their conversation. I was like, "What is going on?" People have these misconceptions about eating disorders that like a person with an eating disorder just doesn't eat, or like they just don't like food and they just want to be like skinny or like lose weight, or like they have this one schema about eating disorders that people with eating disorders have it for this reason and do this thing, which is totally not true, because there's so many different types of eating disorders, first of all, and the reasoning behind why someone might develop it is so complex, and it's most likely a combination of both physical appearance factors as well as like complex emotional factors that cause them to develop it. And I just feel like that's such a big misconception, especially at school, where people just pass these like casual comments and they don't realize how other people in the room might feel when they hear them.
Yeah, I really just wanted to like go off of that in that like eating disorders, I think people have to recognize are filling something for that person. Like they're never happening for no reason, kind of like we talked about in the introductions. There's always something that that person is trying to gain by participating in those behaviors, whether that's a sense of control or to, you know, I feel like control is was something that I really was a big theme when I was struggling, but also that another like huge misconception, kind of like what we were talking about before, during our introductions, we kind of really highlighted these things. But yeah, eating disorders don't happen to just white females, which I feel like is the huge demographic that, like, if you say someone with an eating disorder, that's going to be the thought that comes to mind. And so again, eating disorders don't discriminate. It can happen to anyone. And like Dia was saying, the emotional and physical and like societal surroundings are so complicated and so intricate, and cannot be broken down into like one sentence or to describe all people with them. So.
Yeah, kind of echoing off of what everyone was saying, I think another thing that a lot of people don't realize is there's like more than one type of eating disorder. Like, I think very often people just think of eating disorders as like anorexia. And, you know, they have this one very, very specific idea of what it is, and they kind of just roll with that. And I think society in general sometimes makes it to be like that's the only type of eating disorder that can exist, and all other types of eating disorders are invalid. And I think that's absolutely untrue. There's so many different types of eating disorders, you know, of course, anorexia, like we mentioned, bulimia, binge eating disorder, ARFID, and so many more that I haven't even named. And all of those eating disorders are valid, and everyone who struggles from all types of eating disorders should have equitable access to care. And I think that a barrier to seeking care even is the fact that a lot of people don't even recognize that they have eating disorders, because society has told them that, you know, an eating disorder should look like this, and if you don't fit into this box, then you don't have an eating disorder and you should be fine. And I think that's absolutely untrue.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because no two eating disorders look the same. It's different for everybody. What the factors that cause it to develop are different for everybody, and it's complex, like it's been mentioned on this panel, and also the types. And even no two types of eating disorders. You could have anorexia and somebody else could have anorexia, but your experiences could still be completely different. It's just it varies so much, and unfortunately I was like that too. I didn't think, one, it could happen to me, because yeah, I didn't meet the stereotypes like what Mina was talking about, but two, because I didn't fit, that box. I didn't check all the boxes for a specific type, so I figured, I'm not that sick, I'm fine, I don't need help. So I do think that is causing a lot of problems. So I guess, how do we change that? What can we do right now to raise awareness and to, change maybe some of these misconceptions and stereotypes that are out there?
Before we like fully dive into that question, I just wanted to go off of what you were saying real quick, Jason, of how, like, if you don't check the boxes, you're like, it doesn't matter. It's not like what's happening isn't really happening. And I guess this does kind of go into the question that you just asked, but I think a lot of it has to do with access to care, and who is providing access to care but insurance companies. And insurance companies have a very, very finite view of what constitutes an eating disorder. And if it hasn't already been inferred, I did go to treatment for an eating disorder, and the amount of people that were cut from treatment simply because they had maintained the correct BMI, even though I see them struggling every single day. So physically they're there, physically they've gained the weight back or done whatever, but mentally they are so far from being okay and being able to like tackle life, with the adequate tools. So I think really shedding light on part of the reason everyone thinks that eating disorders are those who are super, super skinny and have anorexia is because that's really all insurance will cover if like you need that treatment. So I really think starting to expand that everyone deserves these resources. If you're struggling with food, you deserve these resources. And it isn't as finite as the insurance companies make it out to be. So yeah, I think that's definitely like a really big like national problem. And then kind of like filtering down that ideology through society, which I'm hoping my other panelists will answer.
No, I literally like 100% agree. And it's so funny you brought it up because I was actually looking into some I want to get more into public policy work. So I was looking into like policies regarding eating disorder treatment and such. And I found an interesting article. I don't recall who it was written by, but it was basically talking about exactly what you said about how insurance company only choose to cover what they want to cover. And many insurance companies don't even cover like they only cover it up to a certain amount of time. If they see that the patient isn't getting better or isn't gaining any weight or whatever it is, they like just stop covering for their treatment. And I even in the article it talked about a specific case where this girl literally died from her eating disorder because her treatment team her like treatment only went up until a certain amount of time, and then they saw that she wasn't gaining weight, so they stopped covering, and then her family couldn't afford it, and she unfortunately died from the health consequences of an eating disorder. And personally, too, I would not disclose it, but I worked with an eating disorder recovery like program, and it was actually I wasn't very I don't know. It was very interesting because their whole thing was, as my parents told me, because they worked with my parents mostly, it was like a family based treatment. It was like, we're hoping to get Dia up to a certain weight, and then after that, she'll be okay. Like, they didn't give any other resources or like, and that's a big thing of why I feel like my recovery took a bit longer because my parents didn't understand how to treat an eating disorder and what they were hearing from these recovery professionals, which they would get their advice like they would think their what they're saying is more like accurate than me as someone who's in an eating disorder, of course. Like they wouldn't trust what I was saying because obviously I was still struggling at that time. And they would just hear what they're saying, like, oh, our goal is just to get Dia up to this BMI, and then after that she's done. Like she's done with treatment, she's treated. And they would just hear that and be like, okay, I guess that's right. Because they don't know what an eating disorder is. They weren't like familiar with this before. And I just feel like this misconception that it's just related to your weight or just related to your health is so untrue because mental health is just as important as physical health, if not more. So I just feel like right now there needs to be more of a emphasis placed on how we can improve mental health, while obviously physical health is important, but how we can improve these both aspects of our health at the same time instead of prioritizing one over the other.
I just want to kind of piggyback on what both of you were saying and talk a little bit about how like education is super super important in terms of speaking up about eating disorders. And I think all of us as panelists have experience, you know, in eating disorder education a little bit. So I think that's something that we can all speak to. But Dia, especially when you're saying like your parents were in this very precarious situation where you know they don't really know like what an eating disorder is. They don't understand, you know, that it's both mental and physical. Um, and so I think education is so, so, so important. I think so many people across the nation don't understand or know what an eating disorder is. They have literally no idea like what that means, what the mental health consequences or physical health consequences are. And so I think that something that I'm really passionate about is going into my community and speaking to children from schools, like students, speaking to college students, speaking to even mental health professionals who might encounter eating disorders at some point in their career and might not really know how to tackle that, and really making sure that they're aware of the resources that are available if they do come across that in their career. But yeah, I think it's really, really unfortunate, like you both were saying, that insurance companies and even eating disorder treatment centers sometimes completely disregard the mental side of eating disorders, especially seeing as many eating disorders coexist with other mental health illnesses such as anxiety and depression. And I think education, especially in the younger generation, and educating our generation through whatever means possible, and making sure that this is an issue that we can slowly start to solve within our generation is really important, I think.
Yeah, like kind of adding on, I feel like society in general, they know what eating disorders are, but they just like have a misconception of it. Like if you look at the mainstream media and their representation of eating disorders in movies and like social media, it's just so false. And social media, in a lot of ways, they kind of glorify eating disorders as a way to like, oh, you can control yourself, you can control your weight, blah, blah, blah. And I feel like it's very important to kind of like change social media and educate people that it's like not something that's light, it's something that's very, very deadly and very important to address.
I want to go ahead, though, really quickly and introduce Taylor, who was just able to join us. Taylor is another wonderful ANAD student ambassador, leading a support group and everything, one of our first on-campus peer support groups. Taylor, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself really quick and tell us one thing that you would want everybody else to know about an eating disorder?
Yeah, so my name is Taylor. Thank you for that introduction, Jason. I appreciate it. I have been working with students at Florida State. We've opened and kind of started a peer support group in its style, but more on campus. And it's been going really well so far. We've had a lot of support, which has been really helpful. I'd say one thing I would love if everyone did know, I'm not sure if this has been mentioned yet, but if everyone did know about eating disorders, that would be a real game changer, would be just that they don't discriminate based on, weight, age, gender, age. I guess I already said age, but race, whatever it may be. So I guess, yeah, I know a lot of times there's often this picture that pops into people's head of somebody with an eating disorder, and that picture is often very skewed towards a certain aesthetic that, like you were saying, is kind of glorified a little bit. And so I think it's important to note that that's not always representative of all people with eating disorders.
All right. Thanks so much, Taylor. And yes, thank you for driving that fact home. We mentioned it earlier in the conversation before you were able to join us, but it's so important to talk about that again, that eating disorders do not discriminate. So if you're sitting there right now saying, well, I don't match the description of an eating disorder, so that's not me. Think again, it could happen to anybody. So definitely, if you have any eating disorder or eating concerns at all, talk to somebody. So let's go ahead and keep the conversation moving here. And I do want to touch on social media. So really, Gen Z, I feel like, you've been the social media generation. Luckily, I got a little lucky where social media didn't really come about until after I'd already graduated high school. But I'm just curious, what role do you think social media is playing in the development of eating disorders, in the barriers that we're seeing to eating disorder treatment? And also, are there any positives out there when it comes to social media? Is there anything we can do on social media to maybe raise awareness and help other people learn in some of that education that Sahana was talking about? So I'm curious to get the panel's thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, kind of speaking to what I was talking about previously, I think social media at the current moment is, you know, pretty overwhelmingly negative at this point. I would say in terms of perpetuating all these like stereotypes about eating disorders, but also, you know, maybe perpetuating eating disorders themselves in a lot of ways with the content that's being shown on social media. Like I feel like if I were to just go and scroll through TikTok or scroll through Instagram, a lot of my feed might, if just like we're starting from a clean blank slate, a lot of my feed might just be body check videos or like what I eat in a day videos or things that, while they might seem harmless, if you are constantly infiltrated with that, 24/7 while you're scrolling can be super harmful. And I know that that has a really negative impact on my mental health. Not to mention all like the photo editing and all that stuff that takes place and the unrealistic um, expectations, like body standards that are perpetuated every day on social media. I think that's really, really difficult, especially for younger children to see, especially because they don't really realize what's real and what's not real. And, you know, these what I eat in a day videos or body check videos, younger kids seeing that and thinking that that's the ideal body or that's what they need to achieve in life is super, super negative. And I think we're already seeing the impact of that, and especially in our generation, in the younger generation. But on the flip side, I really do hope that one day, and I think it's slowly started now, but one day we can use social media as a tool for change and as a tool for positivity, especially within the body image space and the eating disorder space. Um, because right now it's a little discouraging to go onto social media and see all this stuff that's on there.
I definitely agree. Social media is definitely not become, it has been for a while now, a really negative space for not only eating disorders, but so many other types of it, just perpetuating so many other types of unrealistic beauty standards. But I do believe that it can also be used as a way to advocate for these changes, such as Monish's Instagram account and also other Instagram accounts that are now starting to speak up about these issues and raise awareness. And while it may not reach as many people right now, I really believe that if we consistently find ways to promote and advocate for what we believe is right, and because it is right, it's not okay for these accounts to promote unrealistic standards or promote like harmful content. And I believe that if we find ways to advocate for this on social media, it can help reach a greater audience than just like, I don't know, like non-social media methods, like just speaking, like how many people do you just like speak to on a daily basis? Whereas on social media, you can reach like millions of people if you happen to go viral. So I really believe that social media, while it's in a negative space right now, it can also be harnessed as a tool for positivity and hopefully really good change in the future.
Yeah, like in my school, I'm actually researching how social media affects body image perceptions in adolescence. And I noticed that comparing to the past, now, like since social media's rise, there have been more cases of eating disorders or like more cases of negative body image perceptions in adolescents and teenagers. And I feel like that's definitely due to the fact, like with the what I eat in a day is that we like previously talked about, because they usually start with like, oh, a body check. And then I feel like people think that, oh, if I eat like them, I'm going to look like them. And I feel like it's very important to kind of, like, because there's no way you can control what someone posts on social media. But there's definitely a way that you can kind of look at that and like know that, oh, this isn't necessarily true. And this isn't necessarily what my body needs to thrive.
Yeah, and I think similar to what I'm hearing, like combined, is that on social media there does tend to be a trend of like specific focus on body image and on like the food that's being consumed. And it doesn't always, emphasize the points that like there's also exhaustion. There's also, maybe not talking to your friends as much. Like you're not as social. You're not like there's certain sides that I feel like on social media are portrayed as more glamorous. And it circles around the body and the food and not all the other things like the emotions, the shame, whatever it might be that doesn't tend to come up on social media. But yeah, I agree a lot with what Di is saying as well about the positive side too. I have seen a lot of recent influencers kind of pop up on my feed with intuitive eating or health at every size content, which I feel like is really helpful and can kind of pop in our minds throughout the day. If so much of that content we decide to follow, we see it on our feed, and then throughout the day we're thinking, okay, this is okay even if I haven't done this today, or I'm able to still eat this food that honors my body. Um, Things like that. So yeah, I see definitely there's a negative side and definitely there's a positive side.
I just wanted to touch on how, like, we think of social media as like this defined space, right? So like you're either on social media, like you're actively on it or you're not. But I think it's also important to recognize that even if you may not be receiving the content that we've kind of been touching on today, it's like maybe your friend is, and then that underlying bias comes out in a comment or a question or like a just like offhanded whisper or something, right? And so like I just want to like I guess recognize the fact that the influence that social media has that influence when you're actively scrolling or whatever, but it also has that influence when you're just interacting like we've been doing for millennia, right? Just interacting and talking to people because those ideas, those biases, those values can really like bury their way and then kind of underneath these like comments. And so, but I also just want to like also hope to empower everyone that if you're going on social media and you're starting to like come off of social media and just feel like crap, like, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, I didn't yada, yada, yada. Really just like trying to do what you can to like refresh your algorithm, right? So blocking accounts that just are like not stuff you want to see, following accounts that are super body positive and mentally flexible, because I think mental flexibility is a huge part that I think Taylor was talking on too, of like when you're in these traps of an eating disorder, you are so inflexible. It doesn't matter what kind of eating disorder you have. Like things are very very black and white, right?
Thanks so much. And that reminds me of something that I always try to share with folks when I'm talking about eating disorder awareness and using social media is every time you're about to unlock your screen or open up that app and start scrolling through social media, ask yourself, am I using this right now to compare myself to other people, or am I using this to connect to other people? And if you're using it to compare, maybe it's time to put the phone down, put that screen away, and use it when you're ready to connect with people, because then it can be a really powerful tool. And it did. It helped me in my recovery connect with other people. But at the same time, when I would go on there and compare, it just fed right into my eating disorder. So I think that's an important question that we can all ask ourselves every time we go to, start scrolling the feeds. Another question that I want to toss out to the entire panel is, what if somebody's listening right now and they're concerned about a friend? They're concerned about one of their peers. Perhaps they have a child who is, in college or in high school right now and showing signs of a possible eating disorder. How do you start that conversation? Do you have any advice for them on how to navigate those initial conversations or help somebody who might be struggling?
Yes, I can go ahead and get started. I think the utmost important thing is just showing that person that you're there for them. So maybe because I think people can go into like starting a conversation with the utmost intention of helping that person. And, maybe it's starting off with just, hey, I noticed you might be struggling. Did you want to talk about it? And that person might instantly shut down, right? Because maybe their eating disorder is screaming at them, going like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh God, oh my God, we've been found out. We must evacuate. We must never talk to this human again. And I've experienced some moments like that. But I think if you just show that person that if they ever need someone to talk to, if they ever need someone to just sit there and just be together, that support of just space, holding space for that person can really help them open up. And then maybe they can come back to you and say, hey, when you mentioned that you saw me struggling, I really didn't want to confront it, but like maybe it's that late night drive or whatever, and they start opening up to you. Yeah, this is what I've kind of been noticing. This is what I've been feeling. So I think you can start the conversation, but also like taking a step back and just being there is how the conversation is really going to continue.
No, yeah, I definitely agree. Not only I think that being there is important, but staying there is also so important. I cannot stress this enough. Like, just being patient with whoever you're confronting about the eating disorder, whether it be your friend or, I don't know, your child or just anybody you know, you have to not only let them know that you're going to be there for them, but you have to be patient throughout this process because, as I mentioned before, recovery does not happen in one day. It's not linear. There will be ups and downs, and you can't get fed up with the person. I know a lot of people become impatient and try to force recovery on someone else. And initially, they're there for the first half, couple of weeks. They're there and they're fully there supporting them. But then once they start to realize that this might take longer, then they slowly start to back off and just sort of get distant. I feel like many people with eating disorders don't reach out for help because they feel like they'll be a burden if they ask out. And it's just, it's not that severe anyways that you have to reach out for help. But the thing is, no matter at what stage you are in your eating disorder, it's always severe. And so I think the biggest thing is to just believe in them because with the right support, I truly believe that everybody can recover.
I definitely like believe that like patience is a very big thing. And also I like everyone has to realize that when someone has an eating disorder or they're struggling with these eating thoughts, you can't like force them to want to recover. Like obviously they're going to be like, "Oh, this is my whole life." Cuz when you're struggling with an eating disorder, it feels like everything. Like that's just like your number one thing. It feels like your extracurricular activity that you love to do. It feels like what your life revolves around. So I feel like it's important to realize that like when someone's struggling, they're like you have to show them that you want them to be healthy. Like you can't treat them like they're like not human. You have to treat them normal still, even though they're struggling with something, because that definitely helps them like want to recover and want to live their life happily and healthily.
Yeah, I really want to echo off of what everyone said. I think everyone made some really, really great points. And I also want to maybe encourage some of our younger listeners to not be afraid of talking to a trusted adult, especially like a school counselor or a school teacher, because this can be a very daunting conversation to have, especially if you see a friend who you believe is struggling, but you don't really know where to start that conversation, or you don't want to overstep or make them feel uncomfortable. Um, I think talking to a school counselor or talking to a teacher, a therapist, or some trusted adult in your life who you know is like available and willing to have those conversations with you, I think can be super, super helpful and super important, especially because it's not easy to have these conversations for either party sometimes. Not just the person who might be struggling with the eating disorder, but also for the friend who's approaching them or the loved one who's approaching them. It can be a very difficult conversation to have. So I think kind of assessing all your resources, and I'm sure the ANAD website also has some great resources for that as well. Maybe Jason can talk about that. But I think reaching out to a trusted adult can really help.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll jump in there really quick. If you are worried about somebody, give the helpline a call. The ANAD helpline is available to answer questions or to help support you while you're supporting other people. So we are here to answer those questions. We've got a guide on the website too called the Support at Every Stage Guide that has some tools and some tips in there for starting those conversations and having those types of conversations. While we're on this topic of providing support and resources, I really want to kind of get your thoughts on this, Taylor, as far as the peer support aspect of things and what you've seen down at Florida State in terms of having that on-campus resource and that peer support group. Why do you think peer-led support is so important for Gen Z?
Yeah, I think peer support is honestly such a life-changing model to have in place. I think the fact, especially with eating disorders, you think about some of the thoughts that go through our heads or the conceptions that we hold about food or our body or the way we are supposed to interact with food or our body. I think sometimes explaining these things to, a loved one though they may care and though they may have good intentions and it can be very helpful, I think it can sometimes be a little different and hard for them to understand if they haven't experienced these thoughts or these feelings themselves, because some of these things sound a little strange. But when there's a peer support person involved, what I've heard a lot of students say, and just a lot of people receiving peer support say in the past, is just it's so helpful to have somebody who understands. And I can agree with that too, having been a part of peer support programs in my recovery. Having somebody who knows what it's like and who's going to say, no, that's not a weird thought to have. That's completely normal. You're not alone in that. Like, for example, sometimes saying, oh, I feel like I'm not sick enough to a family member might be for them, they're like, well, isn't that like a good thing? If you say it to a peer supporter, it might be different because they can understand kind of where that mindset is leading and where that comes from and how it's not necessarily in your mind always the most positive thought. So things like that kind of that is hard for loved ones to understand or people who care about us to understand, kind of filling in that gap.
I just wanted to like really reiterate that sometimes people really have the best intention, and they just still can't grasp it yet. And that's something I've really recognized in my work with Akita. We've been doing a lot of work reaching out to school districts around Alaska, and we went to this big like district-wide conference, and people are like, this is amazing, and then go and say like the most triggering sentence ever. And you're just like, some people they understand that like this is something that needs to be worked on and something that like cannot be ignored, but like the just like the mindset that has been, or not mindset isn't like the right term, but just the like culture that people live in can really run deep, right? And so it's important to recognize that sometimes people will say things that just like do not help. And yeah, I really agree with Taylor on that. It's so beneficial to have someone who understands exactly where your quote unquote crazy thoughts are coming from, right? So
Nina, you brought up a great point, and it's actually the next question that I want to touch on. And this is kind of general for the whole group, but I'm going to direct it towards you first, because I know that you've got the passion of working with student athletes in particular. So I'm curious, from your perspective, what can coaches and parents of maybe student athletes look out for, and how can they provide support? And then I guess to the rest of the panelists, what can schools do? What would you like to see your high school or your university do to help support students who might be struggling with an eating disorder? So Mina, I'll throw it to you first for like kind of that student athlete perspective.
yeah, for sure. So I was a student athlete, so I've definitely seen how things can go not so great. But I think the mindset that would really just benefit everyone is the mindset like that it's the person first and the athlete second. And whether that's the coach's mindset, the parents' mindset, the student's mindset, I think some really big red flags is like never resting, right? Never allowing yourself rest. So whether that's I feel like crap today, but the coach said we need to do intervals, so I'm going to do the intervals, even though I feel like crap and should probably just like either do a super like chill workout or just not work out at all. Or I just finished a 2-hour practice, but I feel like I didn't get enough out of that practice, so I'm going to go work out for another hour. Those are all like really big red flags to look out for. Again, you should be prioritizing your health, your recovery from a workout. Workouts take recovery, right? You can't just work out and then do something really intense and then the next day just pop back up and be ready to do it again, right? You need to listen to your body. You need to not let coaches tell you how your body is. And if your body is feeling one way, to listen to that and to respect that, and to decide what you're doing that day with that. So yeah, I think that understanding if you put the person before the athletics, that person will always do better in the athletics, right? So if you're pushing someone 112%, they're going to do great for about 3 months, right? And then they're going to fall off because that's not sustainable. But if you're working with someone and going and they're really in tune to their body during that whole process and taking the breaks that they need and pushing it when they feel they can push it, then that athlete, that person is going to be able to succeed. So, yeah, I think really just we all live in a body, pay attention to that body, listen to what it's telling you, and then go from there.
I kind of want to piggyback off of what Mina was saying because I also grew up a student athlete. Like ever since I was in elementary school, I was playing sports, I was swimming, and I completely like what you said, Mina, completely resonated with me because very often I was told by my coaches that I had to do this set or I had to do this workout or I had to do these multiple workouts in a day. And if I didn't do that, then I was lazy or I didn't want it bad enough, or I wasn't working as hard as everyone else, even if it was like literally killing my body to do. And even if I didn't have ample rest and recovery, even as someone who's 10, 11, or 12 years old. And, what you said really, really resonated with me because looking back at it, that's not okay. Right. And I think for younger athletes, especially who don't really realize that you should be paying attention to your body, you should be paying attention to your rest and recovery, especially, at that age and especially as you're growing older. Um, I think it can be difficult to advocate for yourself against figures that you might see as authority figures, but kind of like what Mina was saying, I think it's really, 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 really important to listen to your body and really important to realize that, like Mina was saying, you as a person should come ahead of your sport and your mental health should come ahead of your sport because at the end of the day, that's going to help your sport. It's not going to hurt your sport. And to all the young athletes out there listening, I think if you take a message away from this, just recognize that it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to listen to your body. It's okay to skip a practice or two every week if you're not really feeling up to it, because doing that practice and pushing yourself like 110% is going to be less beneficial for you and your mental health in the long run.
Yes, thank you for that. And one of the things I go around and I speak to a lot of student athletes, and I always tell them that if they've got a coach or a trainer who's pushing them and ignoring their eating disorder concerns or body concerns, give me their name. Like I want to go talk to them. Like, it's one of those things where we have to do everything we can to educate coaches and trainers and people who are those kind of authority figures, especially for student athletes. And I think the same can be said if you shift over to just the social workers that are on campus or the student wellness centers that you've got on campus and the counselors. We see it a lot here at ANAD recently where they're reaching out to us because they simply don't know how to support their students with an eating disorder. So we've got to do more to give them the tools and the resources to be able to support students. And one of the cool things that the ANAD Student Ambassador Program does is it creates those connections on campus and it empowers the students to be able to go out there and advocate for change on their campus. So I want to throw this question out to the ambassadors that we have on the call now. But if somebody's listening and they want to get involved, they want to create that change at their campus, what advice would you have to give them? What have you learned in your experience as an ambassador that maybe somebody else could use at their school?
For somebody who's wanting to start out, I remember, I think personally in my eating disorder journey, I felt like most of my friends knew that I was struggling with an eating disorder. And you know how high schools are. Like, word just spreads. If somebody is like dealing with something or something, people just spread rumors and stuff like that. So it actually made it really uncomfortable for me to actually speak up about any of this. So I think something that really helped me sort of bring more awareness of how serious this topic is at my campus is to reach out outside my school first. I know I reached out to Mr. Wood this summer actually talking about my passion for eating disorder advocacy and my own recovery and just journey with everything and how I wanted to speak up at my campus. I feel like if you have another set of eyes and another person supporting you outside of your school environment, if you feel like your school environment is not at that point where it's comfortable for you to speak up and you fear that you might maybe judged, reaching out to these other organizations such as ANAD, for example, and just getting the help and support you need from someone else to empower you to speak up about your experiences can be really helpful because through this ASAP program, I've gotten so many resources and useful materials. Like we have a training hub and a training portal where we've been able to complete all these modules talking to us about how we can create change at our campus. And through this, I've really been able to step out of my comfort zone and speak up about a topic that I wasn't initially comfortable to speak up about. And it's actually really powerful to see about how speaking up about my experiences can help other people speak up as well. And it's really beautiful seeing how one just one person being brave enough to speak up can empower so many other people in doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I have been inspired by all the stuff that you've been doing, Dia. It's been incredible. Also, I guess, Mina, I would love for you to share more about how people could get connected with all the amazing stuff that you're doing at Akita and with EDC.
Yeah, for sure. I am truly Akita's biggest advocate. So I would love everyone to go check out their website. They have just a website that you can go to, alaskaeatingdisorderalliance.com or .org. One of the two. If you type in Alaska Eating Disorder Alliance, it will be the first one that pops up. And then on there, they have, like I mentioned, a lot of different resources. They have support groups for those who are struggling, but also support groups just for like family members and friends who may know someone and not really know how to approach things, kind of what we've been talking about today. They also have a really great film called Winning at All Costs, Breaking the Silence on Athletes and Eating Disorders. And it kind of goes into the things that Shahana and I were talking about today and how you need to treat the person like the person before you treat the person as just an athlete. And then a lot of different stories and some really good points they bring up. It's only a 30-minute film, so I highly recommend everyone watching it. And it's actually the main person is Holly Brooks, who is a two-time Olympian and now a licensed therapist. So she definitely gives some really great advice and stories and has some really cool perspective. So that is Akita. And then the Eating Disorder Coalition, again, you can look them up online and they have lots of resources there. The Eating Disorder Coalition and the Youth Leaders Council is mainly there to help create that national change. So we're there to help advocate for bills or laws or anything at the national level that can help support either those who are providing support for eating disorders or help increase education surrounding certain things. All of these really great aspects. So I highly encourage everyone who's interested to go do a little Google search and see what you can find, because there's always something new and exciting happening on both of those websites.
Thanks for all the amazing work that you're doing out there to change this narrative and raise awareness. And Sahana, do you want to add anything for the Eating Disorder Coalition part, and then tell us a little bit more about the Eating Disorder Resource Center?
Yes, of course. So I think Mina pretty much covered like anything that I was going to say about the EDC and the work that the EDC does. And yeah, as a part of the Young Leaders Council, Mina and I are part of a really, really wonderful youth-led team who advocates for eating disorders on the national level. And that's something that we're super excited about doing and we're super excited about continuing to do. And then as for the EDRC or the Eating Disorders Resource Center of Silicon Valley is a Bay Area, so that's in California. It's a Bay Area based nonprofit organization that really focuses on creating awareness and raising advocacy, and also um, just advocating for equitable treatment of eating disorders within the Bay Area and beyond. So, kind of similar to Akita, the EDRC has free support groups, not only for those who are struggling, but also for family, friends, and loved ones who might know somebody with an eating disorder. EDRC's website is edrcsv.org if you want to go visit the website and like find out all the resources that EDRC has over there. And EDRC also runs an annual multimedia contest that I really encourage all middle schoolers and high schoolers who are watching this to maybe go and check that out on EDRC's website. It's a super cool contest, and you can submit artwork and poetry and writing and all these things that kind of promote self-love and positivity and all of those things. So if you're listening, I really, really encourage you to go to EDRC's website. Again, that's edrcsv.org. Or if you just, like Mina was saying, type it into Google, it should be the first thing that comes up. But yeah, I really encourage you to go check out their website. They also have great resources for advocating for insurance treatment, which is something that we talked about right now. If you are at all having any issues with insurance or anything, you can totally just give EDRC a call or send an email, and we would be more than happy to help with that.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And I had no idea about the contest. So I'm going to have to talk to you offline about that because that's pretty cool and that's amazing work. So thank you for all that you're doing. Before we go ahead and wrap it up, I don't know where this last hour went. It went really fast. I could talk for a whole nother hour, but we've got to move on to another topic as the day of conversation just continues to roll on here. But before we say goodnight, I want to get a resource from each one of you. If there's any good podcasts out there right now, or books or films. I know we just talked about winning at all costs. Are there any resources out there? Maybe a social media account that people should be following. So I guess as we close out this conversation, I just love for each one of you to share maybe something that's inspiring for you or you think might help raise some awareness around eating disorders or mental health.
I can start us off. First off, I just want to say how inspiring it is to be a part of this conversation and to see how this conversation has, though it has not obviously reached everyone, it's still reaching more and more people every day. And that is like truly the greatest thing ever. As far as a resource, I'll shout back out the Winning at All Costs, Breaking the Silence on Athletes and Eating Disorder film. But I also want to shout out the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I can't remember off the top of my head who it's written by, but again, if you type it on to Google, it will be there. And it is really just about being trauma informed and the way that trauma affects your nervous system and your just the way that you live life. And I think it can be really powerful and important, and really just give you a lot of like empathy when interacting with the world and interacting with other people.
Yeah, so I don't really have like a specific resource to share, but I do want to encourage everyone to continue to practice self-care. And, I think something as simple as just like doing skincare or reading a book or like doing whatever it takes to make you feel good whenever you need it. I think that's super, super important. And yeah, I just kind of want to thank Jason so much for allowing us this platform to speak on Gen Z and eating disorders. I think these are conversations that unfortunately don't happen very much. And I'm really honored to be here with all of you guys who are advocates and, trailblazers in your community all in your own right. So thank you so much, Jason, for this platform.
On your question, if we have any resources, of course, ANAD will be my number one resource for any eating disorder support. They truly have so many services. They have free peer support groups. They have resource guides. They have hotlines. They have the ASAP Ambassador program. But other than that, It's been a long time since I've read it, but I remember that when I had initially started my recovery, and I used to think that a big factor that went into whether or not I wanted to recover was like my eating disorder wouldn't have that, like it wasn't that severe, so it wouldn't impact me. So like why even bother with recovery if it wasn't gonna like impact me that much? But a book that my dad got me, it's called Love Fat by Tabita. I probably jacked up her name. I don't know her last name, but again, if you search it up, it's called Love Fat. It's an autobiography. It is very detailed, I will say that. I don't remember like exact details, but it's a very detailed autobiography about the author's experience with anorexia nervosa. And it just really helped open my eyes. I feel like this book is a great resource for maybe if you're maybe if you get easily triggered, I wouldn't recommend it, but just for parents and people who just want to learn more about eating disorders, this book is a great resource just to see how what it feels like to be inside the mind of somebody who has an eating disorder.
I don't have a specific resource as well, but I definitely think that it's important to make sure that your social media feed is something that is positive for you. And some easy ways you can do that are like if you see anything that's triggering or negative, you can like on Instagram, you can click not interested or just simply like following accounts that are body positive and are pro like recovery. Like for example, my own Instagram Gen Z Against EDs.
Another resource that I found out about not too long ago, actually, that I think is really unique and helpful is Project Heal has a meal support program. And it's kind of like a virtual program where you can go on if you need help with accountability or just emotional support or even just a distraction during a meal. You can kind of go log on to kind of like a Zoom situation and talk to somebody who's been trained to help support you through whatever meal you're going through. So they have several times a day that they can meet for meals. And a lot of times the conversation will be geared towards distraction. You won't necessarily be talking so much about what you're eating or how the meal's going unless you feel like you need support and that's available at the moment. But yeah, I think those are great resources. And yeah, I just want to thank Jason so much for organizing this and setting this all up. And I am so glad that I've gotten to share this space with all of you so far today and so inspired by all the work you're doing.
I'm the one that's grateful for you taking the time out of your day to join me for this conversation and for all the incredible work that each one of you are doing. It's been amazing to be able to spend this time together. For some of us, this was our first time together, and I definitely hope it wasn't our last. I look forward to additional conversations down the road and keeping connected. So thank you everyone for tuning in as ANAD's Day of Conversation continues. Again, I want to thank all of our panelists. And if you're watching the recording of this, we will make sure to have a lot of the resources that we listed today included in the description so you can easily access them. Again, thank you panelists. Thank you everyone for watching and take care.